wife's on the back row in a bright red, black, whatever. I'm standing next to Melissa. And Gary is Juanita's youngest brother. When we were dating 53 years ago, I could not see Juanita. We dated 4 times a week on the farm until Gary, who was 2, and Mike 3. I had to play with them till 9 o'clock, so I couldn't see Juanita until they went to bed. So now you know how old Gary is. He was 2 53 years ago. Tim, thank you for setting this up. Things have been hectic. We went to church in Hendersonville where I work, and then we had a paper cut this morning, and it didn't bleed. And I said, oh, thank the Lord it's not bleeding. And we got in the car and we're driving, and it's bleeding all over my hand. And we couldn't even get it to stop, and got there, and somebody had some bad days. Then I left my computer in the rush to get back here. But I'll borrow one in Montgomery. I don't have to. I've got to go to Ambridge this afternoon for a PhD exam tomorrow. So we're glad to be here. It's been a little hectic, but very glad to be here. One of the big discussions going on today in the scholarly world is the historicity of David and Solomon. Liberal scholars began in the 1800s attacking Abraham, Moses, etc. They're now off the patriarchs and off Moses. They've already proven in their own minds that Moses never even lived, etc. Abraham probably not either. And so they started a few years ago attacking David. And a book has just recently come out by a man named Joel Baden. I don't know how to pronounce the name, but I pronounce it Baden because it's the worst book I've ever read. He tells you that he's going to show you the real David. The book's called The Historic David. How the legend of an invented king grew. Right now, David is usually looked upon by still a few people, very few people that I think David lived. But still, most liberals think he lived. But they want to reduce David to a little bitty kingdom on a hilltop. And the most amazing thing is what's happened in biblical scholarship. I have a student who's writing his PhD dissertation on the history of David. So we're going to just have to narrow in on that part and show you some things that will maybe please you, surprise you. If David was not a real person, one thing that happened was when I went to Israel in 1992, December of 92, the name David had never been found outside of the Bible in extra biblical literature. It had not ever been found. Now, as K.A. Kitchen, the great Egyptologist, says, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And we can say that about a lot of people. But I walked right past a monument under the ground where Hebrew Union College was digging my PhD, where I got my PhD, Reformed Jewish University, and branches in Jerusalem and main schools in Cincinnati. And 8 months later, they dug up a stela, a monument that you're going to see in just a minute. And there it said, talked about the King of Israel and the house of David. So for the first time ever, David's name appeared outside the Bible in extra biblical literature, written by the king Hazael, the king of Aram, era now we call Syria. And in the next 12 years, David's name was found 2 more times. Found on the Moabite stone, it had been broken, and there was a chip there, and they realized that said House of David, and the D had been chipped off. And then K.A. Kitchen found it down in Egypt on one of the temples when Shishak in the Bible, the time of Rehoboam, was making his way in an invasion. He says, I came to the heights of David, when he was in Judah. So 3 times. More recently, other things have been found, such as the Palace of David, still debated, but Eilat Matsar, the granddaughter of a very famous archaeologist, believes she's found the Palace of David. We're going to show you the most recent discovery that's just absolutely unbelievable. Now, if David is first of all, if he's a myth, you wouldn't start having all these discoveries, and pretty much everybody but a guy named Philip Davies in England has admitted that David actually did live. Philip Davies, in his book a few years ago, said David was just about as real as King Arthur. And then about 3 months later, the name David appeared at Dan. This was the famous Dan of Beersheba. We were at Dan, right across from Mount Hermon and from Syria and Lebanon, right there in the northern part of Israel. But if David is just a little bitty backwater king, why in the world did they blow him up into what they says? In Baden's book, he says, I want to show you the real David, and he's far more exciting than the biblical David. His David didn't write a psalm, not even Psalm 23. His David did not kill Goliath. His David tried to usurp the throne from Saul. His David was not a friend of Jonathan. And when he gets finished with David standing there in his underwear, this guy's supposed to be far more exciting than the real David of the Bible. Okay, we're going to show you what's happened since then. Dwayne Bryant, son-in-law of Phil Sanders, you may know Phil, is writing his doctoral dissertation on the historicity of David. He's in chapter 2 right now. I've been studying this topic about 40 years. If David is just this minor king, why in the world is there so much information about him? Did you know there's more information about David than Moses and Abraham? Actually, Jesus and God get the most space, but David is next. Four books called Samuel and Kings, actually with 2 books in Hebrew, but now they've divided them because the scrolls were so long. So you have 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings. Called in the Septuagint, the first translation ever made, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th Kingdom, called in the Latin Bible, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th Kings. So here are 4 books dealing with the monarchy. Listen carefully to what I'm telling you here. David gets 42 chapters. 1.5. He gets all of the second half of 1 Samuel, all of 2 Samuel, and a couple of chapters in 1 Kings. 50 years, a period of 50 years, he gets 1.5 plus chapters. The other 40 Kings and Samuel get slightly less than 2.5 chapters. So 2.5 chapters, a little less than that, covering 450 years and 40 kings, and 1.5 plus chapters covering 50 years and 1 king. 19 chapters in Chronicles. 74 Psalms attributed to David. And then David is mentioned over and over and over again. And if you're familiar with Hebrew, oh, by the way, Mike called me at 10 o'clock, McPherson, and he just had missed their train to go to the Manhattan Church of Christ. They missed the train. And he said, have Tim put me on speakerphone and introduce me. Well, if he had or my brother had, we wouldn't have time for my lecture.
You know Mike will.
Doug would have told all the stories of me mistreating him as a child growing up. Okay. Anyway, which is probably true. And so, if you could read Hebrew, you would turn to Matthew in Greek, and it says 14 generations from Abraham to David, 14 from David to Jehoiachin, the last king in exile who was the descendant of David, and 14 kings from Jehoiachin to the new David, Jesus. The word David in Hebrew, DVD, spells 14. D is 4, V is 6, D is 4. So what a Jewish person sees is David, 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 from the old David to the new David. Does that make sense? Joe Shulam, who preaches Jerusalem, with one of my students, I had not had Hebrew yet at that time. I had 5 years of Greek, but not Hebrew, pointed that out to me. Okay, now having said all that, why in the world does the rest of the Old Testament keep referring back to David, son of David, Messiah? New David is coming. And then the New Testament, Jesus, poor mistaken Jesus, keeps talking about David and how he's the descendant of David, the son of David, how he's in the line of David. So everything just like dominoes falls to pieces. All right, I just want you to see a taste of this. If I really gave you a thorough going over here, we would still be here when the night service came. We can't do that. But what can I do for you? 1 Samuel 14. let's talk about the life of David. What he and I are doing in the dissertation, we're showing they want to have different strands. One strand said, oh, David's a little bitty boy. There's no evidence that David was a little bitty boy. Second strand, David was a hero, killed Goliath. A warrior. Other strand, Saul doesn't even know David. We're putting together in this dissertation a system where you can read the story and you can see it's one author. 1 Samuel 14, 52. It says in the last part of that verse, every time Saul saw a valiant and strong man, he attached him to his staff. Every time he saw a valiant and strong man. In chapter 16, Samuel is told by God to go to Bethlehem and anoint David, or anoint a king. I'll tell you when you get there, it says. Eliab is seen first by Samuel. Said, wow, look at the size of that guy. Like Saul when he became king. So this must be the king. And God says, no. God looks on the inside, man looks on the outside. The reason Samuel was mistaken, and the reason Saul was so easily accepted, although it wasn't easy, but was accepted, the word for in Mesopotamia, the earliest word for king was big man, lugal, big man. And the king was always a head taller than everybody else. Even on the reliefs on the wall, if a king was seated, he still was taller. They'd put him up on a stand or something so he would be taller. It was a kingly concept. Finally, Samuel does anoint David, but we're thrown off there. The fact that David is the youngest son means nothing. That's relative. My youngest brother is, 53? 63. My youngest brother is 63. David's anointed, and that's all we find, a relative thing there. In chapter 16, the last part of 16, Saul is having trouble. We shift from Bethlehem to Gibeah, the capital of the north, and there's Saul having problems. And look at what happens here. His men say to him, when they see this harmful spirit from the Lord, from Yahweh, the word harm is ra. It can mean troublesome, bad. It can mean evil. But God sends a troublesome spirit. And so they want someone to play for him. And Saul says in verse 17, provide a man who can play. Now I want you to look at this resume of this little bitty boy. It's right here. By the way, I do a lot of speaking to the president. I preach once a month there, do 2 services at the women's prison. And I am there every Monday to teach Greek class. I've got 19 ladies in the Greek class there in the chapel on Mondays at 1 o'clock. And I said to them the last time we had 53 that day at worship. And I said, I want to give you a riddle. Johnny's mother, I said, today we're speaking on how people do not pay attention to what the Bible says. Johnny's mother had 3 children. She named the first one April, the second one May. What did she name the third one? And I said, speak out loud. And 51 of them said, June. And one little old lady over here said, Johnny. Johnny's mother had 3 children. She named the first one April, the second one May. She named the third Johnny. What happened? They didn't listen to the information. I have never seen anyone cite 1 Samuel 14:52 that every time Saul saw a man of war, a man of valor, he attached him to his staff. Look at this resume in verse 18. One of the young men answered, behold, I have seen a son of Jesse from Bethlehem who is skillful in playing. That's what we're looking for, a player. A man of valor, a man of war. Whoa, wait just a minute. Did I read that right? A man of valor, a man of war. I did. Prudent in speech, a man of good presence, and the Lord is with him. He's been around long enough that he has a track record. The Lord is with him. This guy's the toughest guy on the block down in Bethlehem. Now he's going up to Saul, and I'm not going to try to trick you folks and embarrass you folks like I did that class. He goes up there, says Saul loved him, and the word love in Hebrew means, it's a very broad word like I love apple pie. It doesn't always mean the same thing. It means he appreciated what he saw. Why? He saw a man of valor, a man of war. Without looking at your Bibles, would you guess in your own mind or speak out loud, what did Saul make David? He saw David, And the natural answer I get if I'm doing a class with children or a class with high school or even adults, he's a musician. Well, that's true. He did make him his musician. We know that because he's playing for him later, right? But what does it say in the text? What does it? Look at verse 21. And Saul loved him greatly and he became his armor bearer. Let me tell you, I don't know of one ancient armor bearer in ancient literature, archaeology, the Bible, where the armor bearer was a wimp or a little boy. Joab had 10 armor bearers. Now, do you remember the story after Saul died and David became king in the south and Ishmael became king in the north, and really Abner was the king, commander? They met together at Gibeon. Each of them had 12 armor bearers or young knights with them. And they ended up with a contest, all of them got killed. These are not little bitty boys, but they're called Na'ar. They're called Na'ars. Now, I don't know if Michael has talked about Na'ar to you or not, but I don't have much time because I give full lectures on Na'ar. I give a speech at Hebrew Union on Na'ar, and I could barely, 5,000 word speech, and I could barely touch on the material. But this word has been mistranslated for centuries. And only recently, in 1976, I was the only person that held the view that did not mean boy or lad. I couldn't find anybody else. I mentioned to my Hebrew teaching friend, and oh, you're making too much of that. But in 76, a guy named McDonald wrote an article in the Journal of Near Eastern Studies saying that Na'ar does not mean boy or lad. And he made a case from ancient Near Eastern history. Many armor bearers are called Na'ar, the word Na'ar. This is going to be important in our study in just a minute. How can I do this briefly? It's a person of status, a person who's a crown chief, a person who's an armor bearer, a young knight. Do you remember when Joseph kept saying to his brothers, "Don't you dare and come unless you bring that boy with you, Benjamin"? Can anybody tell me how long Joseph had been away from home? Or how old he is now? Do you remember how old he was when he was shipped off? 17. He's now 38 or 39. Why? He's 30 years old and becomes governor. We're told that. 7 years of plenty. Now we're in the second year of famine. He's either 38 or 39 years old. He's been gone 21 or 22 years. Benjamin was born a few years before he went away. So Benjamin's probably 26, 27. He's at least 22. Do you dig? I know you're not archaeologists, but do you dig? Okay. So what is Joseph talking about when 6 times the discussion between the brothers and Jacob is, you can't take that boy with, that Na'ar with you? Well, in chapter 37, it says that Joseph was 17. Then it says he was a Na'ar. And then it says his father made him an ornament, special ornament and tunic. And what it did, it showed that he was the crown chief. He was the one who was going to inherit most of the gifts, everything. The brothers would be given gifts like Ishmael was and sent away. You don't ship a brother into Egypt just because he tattletaled on you. Doug, I'm going to tell one quick story. Doug came to me. Doug and I didn't get along real well growing up. It was mostly my fault. Well, it wasn't that. But I was the big brother, 16 months older, but I was a lot larger. I had rheumatic fever, and I came back out of bed to eat notes for 11 months. I was the big brother, and I was supposed to take care of him. Our father had died when we were little boys, and mother had to work 16 hours a day. But anyway, Doug came to me one day and said, "I'd like to run away." And I said, "Let me help you." And I helped him pack. What was the guy's name you were running away with?
Leroy Green.
Leroy. So I helped him get down next to the Buck Creek, which became a river that night. We had finally I told mother and grandmother that I'd helped him get away. Police were looking for him. We had half a bunch in there looking for him. They were hiding in the basement of a burned out church. They were totally safe, and he came wandering in about 4:30, just in time for me not to get killed. But anyway, seriously, you don't do that. You don't ship somebody away because you don't like them or they're tattled at. It was over money. Remember, Abraham was filthy rich. Filthy rich. Abraham can pull out 318 young warriors born in his household and go get Lot, right? Oh, by the way, they're called Nahars. So if you think they're little bitty boys, 318 little bitty boys to go defeat these 4 kings, stupid. My wife said, don't use that word, because my grandson likes to use it, because my grandson uses it. Papa said they were stupid. Okay. One time I'm glad he didn't totally understand it, because I was talking about his mother. But anyway, fortunately he did not understand. He knew I said stupid, but he didn't understand why I said that. Okay. Mike would use that against me, but you go on. So lo and behold, here's very rich. Pharaoh gives him gifts. Isaac gets most of that inheritance. Jacob, by hook and crook, gets the most of that inheritance, and then Jacob goes and picks up another fortune in Mesopotamia. What he gives Esau when he meets him in Jordan is enough to make anybody rich back even today. Well, lo and behold, these movies you see of a few little tents and 30, 40 sheep running around is ridiculous. Massive herds, very powerful sheik. Joseph's going to be the man. Well, here's Joseph called the Nahar. He's shipped off, and I think that's the reason he was. Here, these 21, 22 years later, they come down. They want to bring, he says, bring the crown sheik with you. And they said, we can't do it. Can't do it. Father would die. Okay. Gives you a little taste. I wish I had time to get this. The word occurs 235 times in the Old Testament. And you can really, I'm coming out with a book maybe next year with it. Okay, so we got the picture. And by the way, I think in the Hebrew, one of the young men who told him, I think said one of his Nahars, what's this Saul doing surrounded by little boys? Doesn't make any sense. David becomes the armor bearer, chapter 17. You're in the Valley of Elah now. In the Valley of Elah, you have a battle going on. In the north ridge there is Goliath and the Israelites, the southern ridge, the Philistines, and Goliath out in the middle. You'll see some shots in just a minute of the Valley of Elah. And David comes to the battlefield, and Saul says to him, you can't go and fight him. You're only a little boy, NIV says. Oh, it hurts me. He's already the king's armor bearer. The text has told you that. And what does David say? I have fought, you're only the royal armor bearer. He said, I fought lions and bears. I fought lions and bears and defeated them. God will help me do this. Saul is so convinced he puts his own armor on David. What size was Saul when he became king? Tallest man in the land. There are warriors standing there that do not go out and respond. Abner, the commander of the armies, is there. Jonathan, who's just been made a hero in chapter 13, is there. Saul is there. And Eliab, David's oldest brother, whom Samuel mistook to be the next king. These guys don't go out. David said, I'll go out and fight. And Saul is convinced, puts his armor on David. In my briefcase, there is one of the stones from the Valley of Elah that I had brought to show you. And I was going to pull a joke on you. I was going to look at it with you. Oh, that red stain on the side, could that be blood? It was blood. I pricked my finger every morning testing my blood sugar, and I had put blood on one of the stones. I left it in Hendersonville. Anyway, so David goes out the front gate and kills Goliath. All right, now, I want to do this when we do the PowerPoints together at the same time. The latest discovery, I'm leaving a lot of things out, we just have to do this. The latest discovery is in 2008, there was a fortress found in the Valley of Elah, in the northern ridge. We knew there was a town somewhere named Sha'araim. We didn't know where it was. The maps, atlases all have question marks, used 4 times. But they found the village, they found the fortress of Sha'araim. And I'll show you why we know it's the fortress. This is where David and Saul had their conversation. David goes out the front gate, he goes down the hill, and guess what is the first thing you come to at the bottom of the hill? The brook of Elah. Where he picks up the stones, he goes on out. He kills Goliath, you know that part of the story, and look at verse 52 of chapter 17. It says, and the men of Israel and Judah rose with a shout, pursued the Philistines as far as Gath and Ekron. Ekron is west. Ekron is several miles, and Gath, they are west toward the Mediterranean, where we are. And the wounded Philistines fell on the way from Sha'araim as far as Gath and Ekron. So the bodies started falling right there with the Philistines. And they fell from the road that led to this city all the way west. Well, how do we know that Sha'araim is the right place? There is no city in Israel in archaeology that has two gates. All of them have one gate, one external gate. That's the standard. This city has a gate on the south and one on the west. And what does the word Sha'araim mean? It means the two gates. That's why you call a town Centerville, because it's in center. That's why you call a town High Point. The reason this town was called the Two Gates, the reason we're called the After the South, we've got the Parthenon downtown and a lot of universities. The reason we call Music City, we call, this was the city called the Two Gates. Here we found it. And it says that the battle took place right in front of the two gates, and the bodies fell from the road leading to Sha'araim, the two gates, westward to the Ekron again. Now, okay, so I can start right here, right? You said hit the right?
Yes.
Okay. Gregory, this is one of my PhD students. I don't do PowerPoints, but my PhD students do, and I get them. It's part of the requirement. They have to do a couple of PowerPoints every course we have. So I had 7 in this archaeology class here. Scott used to be the preacher at Grandy White. He's now the dean of Faulkner. Okay? We won't have a lot of time. Warren Shaft is underneath. We could actually talk about that. David sent his Joab through Warren Shaft up to Jerusalem and then captured Jerusalem. But that's indirect stuff. Again, we could show you all these different military settlements and all. Here's a picture of Assyrians. And what are they doing, using for weapons? Sling, stone, sling. Stone's about that big, about the size of a softball. Pool of Gideon, then we could talk about, there's some other things happening there. But I need to get you over to, this is the hands being kept. Sometimes they kept, you can't count all the bodies, so you whacked off a hand, a right hand, a left hand. David and killing Philistines, you can't carry all his body back, so you whip off you circumcise them right there and take the foreskins. You can bring a bag of foreskins. You've got a big bag of foreskins, that's 200 or 300 Philistines. Okay, this was found at Kirbat Kayafa. This is writing. We now know this writing comes from the 10th or 11th century. There are no pig bones found at this site also. And that's another way you know it's a site. There's a Matsar. She found the palace of David. And that's what she's showing. She's arguing for that today. And that hasn't been established yet. Here is the Dan Silo. This is the one I walked right by. It was under the ground a few inches. And here, if you could see it, you could see what looks like a delta, capital Upsilon and a delta, because Greek borrowed their script. Greek had borrowed their script from Old Aramaic Hebrew, and it just, DVD, there's the name. It says House of David. Right above it is Melech Yisrael, King of Israel. This is now called the David Stela or the Dan Stela. Mesh of stone, you can't see it unfortunately, but down here it says the House of David on it. Okay, now how do we get to the next one? That next one's all about the fortress. Khirbet Kayafa is the Arabic name. Khirbet means ruins of, and the place was called Kayafa. This is the southern gate. That is the Valley of Elah right there. So that's one of the gates. Let me pass that one. This is a better one. Tell Ezekiel, mentioned in the book of Jeremiah. It tells you the first part of 1 Samuel 17, the battle took place here, and it mentions also the area. And now here's Khirbet Kayafa. If you walk down the stream, we usually stop about right here and pick up stones at a bridge. There's a bridge where the Brook of Elah comes. But the Brook of Elah goes right by there. That's probably it right there. And so I said to my guide one time, Ami, whom I've used on 18 of my trips, I said, Ami, what do they do with these people picking up all these stones? They just back up another truck, dump truck, and fill it up again. Well, this is about a half a mile away from there. That's Azekah. That is mentioned in Jeremiah and other places. And you look down the road, you'll see this talks about Azekah. We don't need to do that. And the Valley of Elah, for some reason, I don't think it's that foggy, but it must have been a little foggy that day. And so anyway, this is telling you they're getting ready to pitch their tents and gather together. 1 Samuel 17 in the Valley of Elah. This translation says, by the Valley of Elah. I would translate the Hebrew, but there is in the Valley of Elah. This is the aerial view. Here is the southern gate here. Notice the southern gate is here. The western gate is over there. Nice shot here. This is more of a north-south shot, showing you the two gates. This is the road they've dug leading up there. There's Azekah in the background, and this is a beautiful view there. Now, this is inside. This is inside this fortress. You can see one of the ancient walls outside there, and a lot of the houses inside there. This tells about the importance of the site. And then, there again is the front gate. Here is the western gate. You can see Azekah in the distance again there. That's going toward the Mediterranean. Beth Shemesh is not far away from here, where my friend, head of the archaeology at Harding, is digging right now. And I stood right there of the other gate. I stood in the other gate and lectured on this topic. Here are the two gates side by side. They're standard, called casemate gates from this period of time. There's that writing. You'll recognize some of the letters you'll recognize in English. They came through Greek and English. This is where your A came from. Actually, it was a head and two horns, the ox's head, means ox. And then they wrote it faster and faster like this. Aramaic changed the name from Aleph to Alpha, and then Greek turned it on its side and became your A. When the excitement dies down, I'll continue. Here's a picture of an eye right there. There's the eye. The letter ayin is the eye. The pupil dropped out eventually. Greeks said we can't use this out. I can't use it, but we sure need something for our omicron, for our O. So they called it little o. Put two of them together, they call it omega. Okay, it looks like a W in small print. It looks like a big thing. But there are a lot of letters that actually come into, you can trace the whole alphabet from these different Moabite stone, Dan Seal, right down to modern day time. And usually people are excited about it. Okay. Now, one last thing. I assume that we stopped. Time to stop. So what happens is you don't have two stories, you have one story. You have Saul looking for a man of war, man of valor attaches to his staff. You have Samuel mistaking Eliab, looking for a big man, but it turns out it's Saul. You have them looking for a musician, and they describe man of war, man of valor, this resume. He comes to the palace. Saul makes him his armor bearer, royal armor bearer. And then, when David comes up the hill with the head of Goliath, I want to show you that and we'll stop. Oh, by the way, the sword, David used Goliath's sword to cut off Goliath's head. If you'll look at the description in 1 Samuel 17, it's a little bit of a big sword. Not a little bitty sword. And later when he's running as an outlaw, he goes to Ahimelech, the priest, and said, I need some showbread, I need some bread, I need some food, I need a weapon. He said, well, nothing is here but the sword of Goliath that you put here. David said, I can use it. So it showed David was well not a little bitty boy. Probably 20 years old, 22 years old, something like that. But he's coming up the hill, and in verse 55, chapter 17, and Saul said to Abner, whose son is this youth? No, whose son is this Nar? Whose son is the royal armor bearer? He said, I don't know. He's not asking who David is. Liberals say he doesn't even know who David was. He's not asking who David is. Look at the question. He has promised free taxation to the family. He has promised riches. He has promised to marry his daughter. And now he says to Abner, what have I got myself into? Who is this guy? Tell me about his background. I know who he is. He's been training at the palace. What is his background? That's what he's asking. There are no conflicts in the story. One smooth story. And you can do that with the whole life of David. And then they talk about spin, like the politicians say. All this spin. Yeah, they really polished David's life up. David, Bathsheba, Uriah, one of his commanders. No, the Bible doesn't. The Bible paints the picture like Alexander the Great did. He had one portrait painted like this. You know why? It covers the scars. The Bible doesn't cover the scars. You look in the Assyrian kings, you don't ever find a bad Assyrian king, bad Babylonian king. It's rare. The Bible tells it just like it is. David is a human being who makes mistakes. You've been a great audience. I don't care what Tim says. And I should say, I don't care what Mike McPherson says.
Mike's not here, pick on him.
Any questions at all? Anything you'd like to answer quickly? I'll be glad to stay after and talk to you about it.
Oh, Rodney?
Yes.
You mentioned the Dan stone. Where is that now?
It's in the the Israeli Museum. Yeah, I'm not sure they're going to let it travel. They let a lot of things travel. When it first came out, they put it right in the entrance of the archaeological wing. And when you, now it's in the archaeological wing, it was right at the entrance, and they had in King of Israel, House of David was in chalk. They had it white so you could see. But like in Egypt, you have the Merneptah Stela with Israel on it. I said to the museum director, why can't I find it? He said, oh, I'll show it to you. They took me to a back room and down there, hidden away. And they didn't want Israel on there being shown, but that should be one of their top archaeological finds. But they didn't want Israel shown and seen there. So, anything else? Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.